Hello, team players. I'm Joe Rockey here with Local Football Flavor. And today we are going to be breaking down our rankings of the top 15 quarterbacks for a PPR league. And this is going to be very exciting. Bob, as we've done in all these episodes, has not seen my rankings yet. So let's start with them. Both Bob and I agree that the top three quarterbacks are kind of in their own realm, and we don't really need to discuss them for fantasy purposes. Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen, they're your top three. None of us recommend using a quarterback that early, but they justified that they are their own tier. Where I believe the conversation gets interesting is where we start the second tier at pick number 4. And it's hard to say Herbert's not going to have an amazing year on the field, because he is. But the simple fact is Justin Fields is not a good quarterback, but he's very, very fast. And like the other Ohio State quarterbacks, he's going to run himself some touchdowns. So I take him just for the simple fact that I don't think it's going to be good offense, with the exception of him scrambling his life off. And I think that's what their team is eventually going to devolve itself into, because the guy can't throw the ball into a window. So when you say that, I think Fields is going to run. I'd way rather have Herbert on Sunday for my actual team any day of the week. But I think I understand where you're coming from with them at 4. So, Bob, you start there with Burrow. And as we're recording this, Burrow's already missing week 1. That's why I haven't ducked down the 7th. If he was healthy, I'd probably have him 4th. Because I think there's a good chance that Joe Burrow would have won the MVP had he played all 17 games.
Joe Burrow is my favorite quarterback in the NFL. I mean, it really, really hurts me to put him at number 5 in our rankings. He has proved time and time and again that he's a dynamo on the field. He, sticks it out when he's injured. I mean, that's why Jamar Chase had to come out and say to him, "Hey, bud, just sit. We got this week 1. If you need to sit out week 2, that's fine too. We're okay." While I don't think, though, it's a blessing that they play Cleveland week 1, but that speaks to just Joe Burrow's attitude about the game. He wants to be successful. He is successful. I mean, heck, he got the Bengals to the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is not a sentence that we thought that would be said within our lifetimes as Steelers fans, right?
They're going to return right back to Detroit the second he retires. Everyone knows it.
And Joe Burrow sets this team apart in a way that I don't think, he sets this team apart in a way that Patrick Mahomes sets the Kansas City Chiefs apart. Where if they did not have Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City and they were still rolling with Alex Smith, they'd still win games because their coaching is superior. But there would be games that you would be questioning, oh, okay, well, maybe they're not as good as we thought they were, right? Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen are just freaks of talent, right? With the opportunity for lots of turnovers. But Joe Burrow, to me, is one of those just field general leaders. And while that might not always equate to statistics in terms of fantasy football, for him it does, because he sees the field in such a way when he's on it that he's protecting his players, right? He's making sure that the offense is continually moving down the field. And it's almost the reason why Joe Mixon is almost completely irrelevant for fantasy purposes. I could see...
And on field purposes.
Yeah, I could see Joe Burrow. I mean, he loves to run it when he has the opportunity to. I could see Joe Burrow finishing the year as the number 1 quarterback if he were playing all games in the season. And I would have no problem putting him as my number 1 quarterback to end the year. But because he's missing games and he's already hurt, there are question marks there in terms of the year. And those are question marks that Herbert, Allen, Hurts, and Mahomes don't have. And for me, Joe Burrow is that type of player that isn't going to put himself in harm's way as much as Justin Fields is, right? So the way and the style that Justin Fields plays, there is a very realistic chance that he could go down in the middle of a game more so than any of these 1 quarterbacks would on the field. And that's just what happens when you're a running quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
And Fields has that opportunity to elevate his game. And out of all of these quarterbacks, the only two quarterbacks on this list that have really a chance to elevate their games to the next level, and three if I take your list, is Pickett, Jones, and Fields. All three of them. I'm leaving Lawrence out of that discussion for a moment because these three guys we know already have wheels. They already run the ball fairly well as quarterbacks. To take them to the next Hurts and Allen level, they need to learn to become better passers. And so for Justin Fields, in order for him to elevate to that number 2 or number 1 by the end of the season, he needs to throw in the vein of touchdowns that Daniel Jones threw last year in 20 touchdowns, at least.
Yeah. I don't think it's capable.
Is that a possibility? I don't think so. Because
he does. Cole Kmet got 20 touchdowns.
The weapons that they have, DJ Moore is an elite level talent. There's no doubt about that in my mind. He's a very, very good player. Chase Claypool is not. Darnell Mooney, it was out all last year. Is he good? Yeah, he's good, but he's not great. And so when you're looking at the opportunities that he has, the schedule will lead itself to maybe a couple more touchdowns through the air than he had last year. And his legs will only take you so far as a quarterback here. And so for that reason, he's not in my top 5. Because I think even if he plays a full season, which he didn't last year, and this is the problem with both Fields and Jackson, right? Is that Fields and Jackson have that potential to not play the full season. And just because
Lamar Jackson hasn't played in December yet. That's 3 years from that.
Exactly. And that's just their style of play. So if you are comfortable knowing that your quarterback is not going to be there for at least 3 or 4 games in the season, but again, high risk, high reward for these guys, there's a good chance for Justin Fields that he could run for 200 yards and throw for 150 yards.
With the two runners in Fields and Jackson, I believe Fields has not seen his best day yet. But
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
And
Lamar definitely
Fields
has.
being the running quarterback on the upside, Jackson being on the running quarterback on the downside. And if you look at the way that the Ravens are constructed, or Chicago's constructed, it's very similar to how the Ravens were during early Lamar. They had a receiver who can get open in tight windows if you're good enough to get it to them. In Baltimore's case, it was Hollywood. In Chicago's case, it's Moore. Neither one of the quarterbacks will be able to get it to them. So who became the answer in Baltimore? Andrews. Who do I think is going to be the answer in Chicago? Kmet. I think it's very similar to there. But at the end of the day, the real show was Lamar running. And I think the real show, again, is going to be Fields running. And he's the only option they have to score consistently. I mean, when it's all said and done, Chicago, as much as we hate on some other teams like Cleveland and Oakland as being train wrecks, Chicago has been a dumpster fire except for 1 year in the 80s. And they're going to continue to be it.
Yeah.
And this whole false narrative, because they're America's third biggest city, that they deserve respect, is bullshit. Justin Fields is a horrible quarterback in real life. If he was a running back, he wouldn't be on this list. But because he's a quarterback and can get essentially the cheat code of fantasy football, is the only reason he's on here. But let's go to another guy who could be a legitimate number 1 MVP type quarterback. Does run a little bit, not as much as people think, in Lawrence. Lawrence last year, from his bye week on, was the 5th best quarterback in the NFL. He threw only 2 interceptions from that point. First half of the year, he threw a ton, and he got his game together. Excuse me. And this year, he's got a massive upgrade, assuming Calvin Ridley performs the way we think he will at receiver. I think Lawrence is one of these guys who's poised, even though he doesn't have the cheat code of running it in the end zone, of having a blowout Allen-type year. And that's why I have him ahead of Herbert. I think he might be the best of the non-runners when it's all said and done.
I actually feel that for Trevor Lawrence, he has the best opportunity to have a Justin Herbert-style season where we're talking about 30, 33 touchdowns, couple interceptions here and there, maybe like 7 interceptions if he can tone it down a little bit. And that yardage total will be pretty solid.
Mhm.
I just don't. When we look at Hurts, Allen, and Mahomes, the things that they do, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is ever going to put up a 5 touchdown game. It's it's a possibility, but
He won't need to. I mean,
I don't.
that's the
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Play a hard schedule.
I don't think that Trevor Lawrence is going to have to throw the ball 50 times in a game or 45 times in a game for them to win the game. Patrick Mahomes, because the running game is so suspect at times, he has to throw the ball a lot. Hurts' numbers are coming from that combination of being a good passer and a good runner. Josh Allen's, if he could get those interceptions in tow, you know what I'm saying? But for Trevor Lawrence, the only thing that's really dinging him, I think, from being, for me, top 5 above Joe Burrow is just in terms of volume per game. Is I don't feel that they want him to throw it as much as those top tier guys because he's still learning a lot. And when you throw it a lot, you have a better chance to have a lot of turnovers. This is something that the coaching staff at the New York Giants learned with Daniel Jones. If I don't have him throw a lot, he's not going to turn the ball over a lot. So therefore, that's a win for us. And that's how I feel about Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is an elite caliber style of quarterback that is probably going to serve Jacksonville well for many more years to come. They finally have a top tier wide receiver, we think, in Calvin Ridley if he comes back. All the tape says that he's back. You have Christian Kirk, you have a serviceable tight end, you have a serviceable backfield. All of these things point to Trevor Lawrence doing well. And to predict with a fair amount of accuracy, I would say that he's probably going to get between 28 and 34 touchdowns this year is not an understatement. It's just that Herbert, I feel in my mind, and the reason I have Herbert above him at 4 is because I could see Herbert more likely doing that easier than Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. I think there's going to still be a little bit of struggle in Jacksonville as opposed to the Chargers this year.
And that's totally fair, because one of the things that doesn't get quantified that we talked about in the running back episode about Najee was Herbert was hurt in the beginning of the year. He got absolutely hurt in that game against Kansas City early in the season. And you never really know truly when a quarterback recovered because he threw bullets all year even when he was hurt. So him being healthy all year, Herbert could blow it up. And there's a very good chance the Chargers are the highest scoring offense in the NFL this year. I mean, that would not be out of the realm. Them up there with Dallas to put up the points because they're going to need to.
Yeah, and here's the thing too, Joe, about these quarterbacks. These are where we think they're going to fall towards the end of the year. But when it comes to drafting, primarily this is how they've been drafted for all intents and purposes. Your list more so outside of Lawrence, right? Lawrence usually falls as the 8th or 9th quarterback taken. And in most typical PPR leagues, whether that's a 10-man or a 12-man league, Trevor Lawrence is getting drafted in the 6th, 7th round of leagues, sometimes even in the 8th or 9th. And the value there of why I would want to have Trevor Lawrence is crazy, right? I mean, he's giving you the opportunity to go 6 to 7 rounds of really talented players before I even think about my quarterback, and he still has the potential to get upwards of 30 touchdowns. Justin Herbert,
dude, it's a slam dunk. I mean, Lawrence is where ADP is right now. He's the steal.
And also in that same regard, Justin Herbert also plays into that a lot because of the season that he had last year. He's getting drafted after guys like Fields and Lamar Jackson, putting him usually in the 4th or 5th rounds. I've seen him most times in the 5th round, which gives you, within the early 5th round, which gives you the opportunity, if you are at that back end, to have 4 to 5 quality, talented players before you're even thinking about quarterback. Where the problem is with Lamar and Fields and Burrow and Allen and Hurts and Mahomes, less so with Burrow now that he got hurt because he's getting drafted a little bit later now, is that you're spending a lot of draft capital on these guys, and you are expecting at minimum 30 total touchdowns at minimum from these guys. And there's value in other positions, but it's hard to see it when you have a guy staring at you that you know is going to get a total of 30 touchdowns or more.
Yeah, so this is one of the things with quarterback in general that's an issue. It's hard to really differentiate yourself. Like a tight end, we know Kelsey is going to be in his own stratosphere. And there's a cut at what, like the fifth-ish, seventh-ish receiver, they're in their own tier. At quarterback, it's 3. And then from that 4 to 10 range, yeah, there's a possibility one of them ignite, but all of them have the same possibility of being that same general block. You know, like for instance, we look at Kirk Cousins here. Kirk Cousins is in an offense where they chuck the ball like crazy, the best receiver in the game, one of the best tight ends, and everything we just said about Herbert could be exactly applicable to Kirk Cousins. And it's not an out-of-the-realm sentence. The NFC North does not play defense against the pass. They score billions of points all the time. And the North plays the South. So when they go down and play Tampa and Carolina, they're not going to have crazy issues, Minnesota will. And then you look at Tua, who basically won September and October last year until he got hurt. If he stays healthy the whole year, and so does Tyreek, it could be amazing. But once we get to Tua on my side, this is where I get into this balancing of if Tua gets hurt, he's irrelevant. Do I think Tua's going to get hurt? I can't really factor that in, so I got to assume he plays 14 games. So that gets me through the regular season. But when I look at my bottom 5 here, in Carr, Rodgers, Prescott, Pickett, and Love, with the exception of Prescott, all 4 of these guys are probably going to be streamable in various leagues on the waiver wire. And I'm going to give a quick breakdown for all 4 of them about why they're worth considering to actually be drafted. The first being Carr that I have at 11. He was the first free agent quarterback selected, period. He was taken, New Orleans, one of them, that was their guy. New Orleans loves doing a vertical downfield passing game. Carr is a perfect fit for that. And more importantly, the Saints and the Falcons have by far, by an order of magnitude, the easiest schedule in the world. So we look at New Orleans' running back room and say, who are they going to give the ball to? And we basically see an old guy in Williams and then a giant mess as the rest of their running back room, which to me means Carr is going to be the one who benefits from that, putting the ball up and down the field on a really weak schedule. I believe Carr is one of the most underrated values going into here. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that I know you hate, Bob, but the Jets are all in on him. And if the Jets end up being a playoff team, it's going to be because of Rodgers. And that's just a fact of life. He has the potential of being league MVP. He has the potential of being run out of the league. And that's why I put him at 12, because if he was more certain, he'd be in the top 5, but he also has the possibility of being gone. Kenny Pickett, we talked about a little bit last week, talking about Najee. When you look at his per-play ratio, it was top 10 last year, but if you look at his per-game ratio, it's horrible because he got hurt in 3 games. So I believe Kenny's going to be more efficient. Looking at the preseason action, his ball placement is much better than last year, and he's putting the ball downfield further, again, with a limited preseason exposure we have. But I don't think there's a way the Steelers don't score more touchdowns than last year. Kenny is one of these sneaky guys who gets running yards people don't expect, and I think that's going to be there. And Jordan Love is on this list simply because the Green Bay Packers are an incredibly well-run organization, and you don't get rid of a Hall of Fame quarterback if you don't believe in the next guy. And do I have hard evidence to say Love is going to be the great answer? No. It's more so a belief in the floor in the Green Bay Packers that Love is going to be something. And likewise to Kenny, he will scramble a little bit. He'll get you some random 40-yard games that those 4 points add up. So I believe in going with that much more than a Russell Wilson, who I think there's a greater chance he's out of football next year. And Daniel Jones, because you don't pay a quarterback and let him keep running it. No other organization has done that. And if you take the legs out of Daniel Jones, he's not a valuable quarterback at all. Like, he only lived off the cheat code of running. So that's why I lean on some new blood going on there at the bottom of my list. But I believe all these people are worth considering stashing on your bench, right, and then having them.
So I want to go back to Kirk Cousins here. And
Okay.
I think he's a quarterback that is getting glossed over a lot. You're looking at Kirk Cousins and you're drafting him 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th round. He's one of those quarterbacks that over the last, 8 seasons, he hasn't totaled less than like 27 touchdowns per season. The only thing that's really limiting to Kirk Cousins is turnovers. He throws a decent amount of interceptions and he does fumble the ball. But you know who also throws a lot of interceptions and fumbles the ball? Every single other quarterback not named Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen. I mean, these are, when you look at it and you look at Joe Burrow's best season from a touchdowns to interceptions ratio, that pretty much matches Kirk Cousins' best season from a touchdown to interception ratio. I just want to kind of, I'm going to look at these stats for a little bit, and I want to read them off to you before I get to Daniel Jones, because we're not forgetting about Daniel Jones here, what you just said. So I'm looking at Kirk. Last year he threw for 29. The year before 33. The year before that 35, 26, 30, 27. So all of those, in only 2 of those seasons did he limit himself to under 10 interceptions. So he throws a decent amount of interceptions because he's trying to get the ball to Justin Jefferson. He also fumbles the ball. He had 7 fumbles, and the previous year in 2021 he had 12 fumbles. So when you're looking at it, you're seeing to yourself, okay, well, Justin Fields throws a lot of interceptions, fumbles the ball a lot too. He has that rushing upside. So Justin Fields is like taking a running back. You're getting another running back instead of actually getting the quarterback. So there's a little bit of an advantage there. But if I can get Kirk Cousins in the 10th, 11th, 12th round, that means that I have even gotten better value at that point in time. Because Kirk Cousins is going in the same realm as Tua. And let's not forget that Tua last year went 25 for 8, which is very similar, if not the exact numbers of Trevor Lawrence, who is going, 6, 7, or is going like 7th to 8th round.
Played all the games.
Right? And Lawrence played all those games. And so you're looking and you're saying to yourself, okay, well, should I take Kirk Cousins after all? And there's no reason to say as a fantasy football, player that you shouldn't, because he has a tremendous amount of value and a very high upside. He has shown you that he can control the interceptions when the team is good, right? And he has always seemed to have a number 1 wide receiver, whether that was Diggs or Justin Jefferson. So to say that Kirk Cousins should be outside of a top 10 would be doing disservice to Kirk Cousins. And I think that some rankings have him outside of the top 10, and it seems to disregard his past history and what we think of the current team. We're not saying the current team's bad at all. We're just saying that, maybe they might struggle a little bit more. But if he comes back down to earth and puts up Trevor Lawrence numbers,
but they're not going to struggle because of their offense. They're going to struggle because they don't have a defense.
Which means he's going to see the field more. And that's more opportunities. And he's going to throw more touchdowns. He's going to be on the field. The only thing I don't like about Cousins is that if you play in the league, which you should, where there's negative points for interceptions and fumbles, there's a good chance that he might not put up a game that you really like sometimes.
Yeah, that's fair. But so is Geno Smith. Geno Smith, the second half of the year was basically that. And when we look at her in the same realm, like, it's not even close. Like, Geno Smith had a great first 8 games of the year last year, and then incinerated as it went on. Remember, there was a point when Seattle was a no-doubt playoff team. And then November and December happened, and they had to win the last week of the year to get in. That was a lot of the Geno Smith experience. This team barely beat Arizona. They needed a touchdown with 3 minutes left to beat Arizona.
And I don't think they beat the Rams.
That's a lot about the Geno Smith experience.
Yeah, with Geno, he was extremely efficient early in the season. Even in the later parts of the season, he was really efficient. He was
He
throwing
wasn't scoring
deep.
touchdowns, though.
He wasn't scoring touchdowns, but he was extremely efficient, setting them, giving them opportunities to win games. Now, with a full second year as Geno at the helm, they still have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They got Jackson Smith. They have a full running back room. They have an offensive line that seems to be set. So, to me, to say that Geno couldn't throw for 25 touchdowns this year, upwards of maybe 30, 33 or so touchdowns, I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility for Geno
Not
Smith.
aggressive enough. That's the problem.
But you're not taking him high, at least now when you're drafting him.
I don't think he's going to finish in the top half of the league.
I think
is what I'm trying to say when it's all said and done.
See, I think when I compare him,
he's going to throw touchdowns. He's going to throw interceptions too, a lot like the whole Kirk Cousins conversation. Those are basically mirror images of each other. I don't think Geno is going to push the ball enough to score touchdowns. And to me, this is the number one fear I have with the Seahawks overall.
Disagree.
Because when they get tight, they hand the ball off. And when that's the case, they don't trust Geno in tight windows. You're basically now relying on 20-plus touchdowns, which certainly Metcalf can give you. But I just don't believe Geno's going to give it to you, and he basically has no running ability.
So I will give you that he doesn't have the opportunity. He doesn't have the skill set to run the ball. But I'm feeling that this reclamation arc of Geno Smith is still going to carry on. Yes, teams started to figure him out a little bit last year, but he didn't play worse as a quarterback. Statistically, as a fantasy quarterback, that's not what you wanted. But he was still putting Seattle in positions to be successful. It's just that didn't work out. They lost to Arizona. They lost to the Rams. And I think they beat the John Wolford Rams once, but it was a mess. They should have. They got a little bit too high for the britches there. But Pete Carroll, as much as I dislike Pete Carroll as a coach of USC, as a coach of Seattle, he's been one of the best coaches of all time in the NFL, in my mind. You're gonna look back at this reign of Seattle, especially with Russell Wilson, and say, wow, if Belichick wasn't in the league and if the Steelers weren't as good as they were for such a long time, we'd be talking more about how good Seattle was for that long period of time that Seattle was good for because of Pete Carroll. And I think a good coach, and I've said this many, many times before, a good coach paired with an average quarterback makes the average quarterback better than the sum of that quarterback's parts just by scheming correctly. A great quarterback paired with a great coach makes them elite level. Patrick Mahomes, right? And so when I look at this whole list and I say...
That's why it's Russell Wilson on your list.
I look at this list and I say, who has the opportunity to elevate to the next level? Well, I love Dan Campbell. I think he brought out the best in Jared Goff last year from a statistical standpoint. Yes, he threw a decent amount of interceptions, but that was the best football that I think we've ever seen
Goff
like play.
Different people. It's like when the Hulk is in Hulk mode and Bruce Banner's walking around. That's home and road Goff. It is crazy.
It was really nice to see it. And so when it comes to players like these guys, why I have 11 through 15 the way that I have them, and Derek Carr and Jordan Love are basically 16, 17 for me on this list as well. Daniel Jones has the rushing capability. Last year, he only threw for 15 touchdowns, something like that. Not good. Limited the turnovers. He has thrown for 20 touchdowns in his career at one point in time. Now, I don't think or see that the Giants are despite them paying Daniel Jones the money that they paid for Daniel Jones. I don't see them scheming differently this year. And if I can get cheaply that same quarterback again who rushed for 700 yards, 6 or 7 touchdowns, basically putting up Ramondre Stevenson type numbers, and I can get him back here with the opportunity to get 15 additional touchdowns, I'm not going to pass that up. But in order for Daniel Jones to be a long-term success in the NFL, and we talked about this with a guest, if anybody wants to go back and look at our video when we were talking with a New York Giants fan, Daniel Jones has to elevate his game. He has to learn how to throw the ball deep. He has to learn how to, escape pressures without running all the time, and get more and more comfortable in the pocket. Now, why do I have Daniel Jones at the 12 hole over Tua? Well, the only reason is I would have Tua right where I have Geno, but the fact that I don't think Tua is going to play the full season, he only topped out at 25 touchdowns last year. Yeah, he could throw for 30. He has the talent to throw for 30. But the injury is a very real thing, especially when we come to concussions. If they're just going to take him out of the game immediately and not put him back in there, it's a very real chance that his injuries could really, out of all of the injuries of any of these quarterbacks, could derail his career forever. And then Big Russ. Russell Wilson is the biggest reclamation project, and the Denver Broncos are one of the biggest reclamation projects in this year. Sean Payton, if he is who we think he is, he should be able to bring the best out of Russell Wilson. Now, if in fact Russell Wilson isn't as good now in his old age as we might hope, you're not really losing fantasy-wise much of anything, because you're probably either taking him as your second quarterback, or you're taking him as an insurance to a quarterback like Kirk Cousins that you took way, way, way late anyway. You're not investing a lot in Russell Wilson, and the Denver Broncos are investing a lot of money. And to your point that you made about who was this player, about paying money to a player, about like Daniel Jones, right? And even when we were talking
Lamar,
about
they're paying him money to change their whole offense to make it a passing offense.
And you say, okay, well, I'm paying this guy money. Is he going to turn out and have a good year? Well, I think he certainly has the potential to throw more touchdowns than he has bathrooms this year. Hopefully he can get up into the 20s, 25 touchdowns. But I think he's going to top out this year at maybe 25 touchdowns. And if that's where Tua was last year, and that's where Trevor Lawrence was last year, and we were saying, oh yeah, I think that's perfectly fine for a quarterback at the back end here. And I think it's perfectly fine if he gets that the Denver Broncos will be okay as well. It just so happens that the Denver Broncos are paired up in a division that has Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes, so it feels like you're going to lose those games all the time. But when it comes to the back half of my list here, the reason I'm keeping off Kenny Pickett is I just don't like Matt Canada's way of scheming the offense. So I think that really limits his upside. Jordan Love, like I said, he would be like that 16-17 range to me, is that I think that there's going to be a little bit of over-reliance on the running game. So you're probably going to have Daniel Jones-like numbers, but a little bit better, I think, in the passing department, because I think Jordan Love's a better passer, but I don't think that Love will get that love on the ground. So that I think that that's limiting his upside just a little bit there. And then Aaron Rodgers, hell, if he ends up throwing MVP style numbers in New York, like I said, to you way earlier in the offseason, I mean, they're a favorite of mine to win the Super Bowl if he's able to come back to MVP style numbers. And I mean, if that happens, he's winning comeback player of the year over DeMar Hamlin, which would be crazy. But it would happen because he had a terrible season last year. And if he takes the Jets to a Super Bowl, there is no way that they're not voting for him for all of the awards, because that's the biggest thing that has ever happened in New York, football forever. You know what I'm saying? So, like, when it comes down to it, I kept him off the list just because I think that Geno has a little bit more upside in his offense. I think Daniel Jones has a little bit more ways to develop, and he could become better. Jared Goff, same thing. But Aaron Rodgers is just, he's Aaron Rodgers. And so to not have him on my list, that was maybe a bad call by me, but there's a lot to say.
It's okay.
there's a lot to say about Aaron Rodgers, and he's good. He's great. Is he going to be elite like he was? Maybe, maybe not. The Jets are in a hard division. It's a hard schedule. That definitely will play into the numbers. And if he ends up at 25, 24 touchdowns, I still think the Jets are going to play really well and still make the Super Bowl even with that.
Perfect, Bob. I like it. Why don't you bring it home?
What do you want me to say?
Oh, that's your conclusion. Thank you for watching Joiner Best Ball, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, all right. Local football flavor fans, thanks for watching this episode. We are planning on doing some best ball leagues as we get into late August here and early September. Send us a message on our YouTube channel, email us, reach out to us. We'd like to do it with some fans. We're excited about this football season. We want to travel and take this journey with you. And be sure to check in with us on our next episode.
Perfect.